It wasn't the cancer. It wasn't my first divorce. It wasn't wasn't living with my mother growing up. It was deciding to take myself on. That was the hardest. And I'm still in that. That's the hardest piece of work.
I would agree that's the hardest for me as well, because
Yeah,
the brain's job is to keep us away from pain. And
totally.
these are the most painful things we've ever
Yep,
encountered or are holding on to, you know.
exactly. And we create this sort of scaffolding around our lives that we think is, going to hold us up, but it's really more like a house of cards.
Yeah.
It's going to come down at some point. The question is, do are you going to wait for that thing to happen? That we could call that being reactive, or you can be more proactive and say, I'm going to get out ahead of this. Like, I'm going to actually make a decision to improve my lot. Like, I'm going to be a transition person in my life. I'm going to be a better man than the people that sort of were around me. Like, for example, than my father, who really succumbed to my mother. He couldn't win over her. And so he became a smaller man. Am I going to do the same thing, or am I going to actually have a voice, and am I going to actually be a transition person in my life? That's a really tough choice for men.
Yeah, because I mean, when you put it in those words, of course, everybody is going to say they want to be the transition or the whatever they want to become. But then the actual act of like, okay, you
Exactly.
made the decision you want to change. And then the very next day, you're facing the same habits,
Exactly.
same neural pathways, same tendencies,
Totally.
emotions coming up. It's just like literally the hardest thing in the world, you know?
The hardest thing for me was, to that point, was I think I was maybe in my mid 30s, when I had two kids, and I was very unhappy in my marriage. I thought it was my first wife that I was unhappy with. Certainly there were some challenges, but what I realized after going through all of that, when I got into my second marriage, was there I was again. Sort of like that old adage, wherever you go, there you are.
You know, you are.
And that was maybe one of the scariest moments in my life, because I realized, holy shit, this is the same thing all over again.
Which is beautiful though, because that's the moment that's
Right.
when you see that, it's really hard to not see that,
Totally.
moving forward. It's like
Totally. I
when you
mean, the
realize
first time you could blame everything externally, right? But the second time, it's not, not as much so.